Buddhist BookChat is your gateway to the wisdom of Buddhist literature, past and present. Each episode dives into inspiring books by great masters, contemporary teachers, insightful authors, academics, and leading publishers, exploring the teachings, stories, and practices they value. Whether you're new to Buddhism or a seasoned practitioner, join us to discover new reads, timeless wisdom, and the joy of bringing the Dharma from the page into daily life. Our guest for today's podcast is Lopon Yudron Wangmo. Yudron Wangmo is a Buddhist teacher dedicated to the twin purposes of personal awakening and serving as a bridge between Tibetan Buddhism and the English-speaking world. Formally authorized to teach in 2017 by Lama Pema Dorje Rinpoche and bestowed the title Lopon, a term of respect meaning teacher. She guides students in the Dudjom Tersar lineage of the Nyingma school. As the founder and spiritual director of the Mayum Mountain Foundation, a Buddhist religious nonprofit, she leads group practices at her home and center in Calaveras County, California, while also traveling throughout the United States to give public teachings and talks. Her online classes provide a space for sincere practitioners to engage deeply with the wisdom and methods of her lineage. Okay, welcome Lopon Yudron Wangmo to Buddhist Book Chat. I'm really pleased that you're here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time. So I wanted to start for our listeners/viewers to just give them a sense of who you are, your background, both as a Buddhist, but also as a writer. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, gosh, I'm kind of a Dharma geek. I've been involved in Tibetan Buddhism for 30 years, and it's really the center of my life. Um, and so everything I do kind of comes out of that place. And um, now I teach, but when I wrote the novels we're going to talk about, I wasn't authorized to teach. So it was in part a way to, without preaching, communicate Dharma. Especially, I was interested in young people, because there was some sanghas have all ages in them, but a lot these days are all white-haired people. So I wanted to kind of encourage kids. And so yeah, I live out in the country, and I have a solo elder life. I have 3 cats, and I teach online. I lead small practices here, and it's a quiet life.
Excellent. I'm also quite hobbity. So I just wanted to, obviously you wrote before, you're clearly a writer. So, because if that was your first book, it's a very good first book. So, um, did you write as a child? Did you study writing? Did you always just write? Or did you after, because I know you wrote this book after you came out of your first 3 retreat, is that right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you always write and just think, oh, I'm gonna write in this way now? Or was it a
I
new
did
thing
a
for you?
lot of academic writing in the sense of I have 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree, so there's a lot of writing involved with that. And I would say it was bad writing, and not good by either academic or professional writer standards. But there was just a facility with the process.
Mm.
I knew grammar, et cetera, et cetera. And when I was younger, I wrote poetry and songs, and I love words. And so when I came out, decided I wanted, when I was in my last year of 3 retreat, I dreamed up this idea of writing young adult fiction. So I had to learn how to write fiction. And that really meant relearning how to write because, the way people write for a master's degree is
Mm.
awful. And I and also overly, highfalutin. I really needed to learn how to write to regular people and books that people wanted to read, not just geeks like me, but regular people. So I think that we were talking prior to starting this. I think you have a similar trajectory, you
Mm.
know. So I went into writers groups and stuff and worked very intensively with it for a couple of years and workshopped my chapters and of excavating Pema Dorje, my first novel. And I'm glad it came out okay. I'm a little bit perfect. It's funny, I have ADHD, so I make a ton of mistakes writing. And structure is really hard for me, continuity and stuff like that. So, but I also have this perfectionistic side of me where I didn't want to put out junk and
Mm, mm,
really wanted to be effective. So that's how the fiction writing started. And I still use a thesaurus all the time for taking complicated words and making them regular people talk.
mm,
Because not only wasn't I involved in universities for a number of years, but my father was like a constitutional lawyer, and I was
mm.
raised in an upper middle class family where people use huge vocabulary words, and that most people don't know. It took me years to figure out that declivity was not a normal word for a dip in the road. Their mom and dad would say, "Oh, there's a declivity coming up. We better slow down." And I didn't even know these words were rare. So I'm not saying I'm some, vocabulary genius, but that's the kind of how nerdy language that I use.
Mm.
So I worked hard at it. So it's nice to hear that from a professional like you that it landed well.
Yeah, I think the effort shows, and I think the intention shows too. I think when writers want to connect with readers rather than just show off, I think you can feel that somehow in the writing. I think that's
Hmm.
really great. So, um, the interesting thing about what you've just said to me, and there'll be lots of interesting things for other people, is you kind of implied it, but that the language that you have is sort of invisible to you. It's normal to you, so we don't really understand that it's not normal to other people. I had a similar experience when I was talking to my dad. My dad was a truck driver and I think he went to grade 9, so very limited education, physical laborer, very working class. Um, and I just popped out this. And I remember once saying to him, "Oh, I've been procrastinating doing that," because he asked me if I'd done something. And I said, "Oh, I've been procrastinating doing that." And he went, "What?" So even that, what I would think of as a very simple, common word, he didn't know. And I was like, oh, and then something lit up in me. I was like, oh, I am not talking like everyone else. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it was a very interesting moment. So, and that's the thing about that means we have to work at it to communicate. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So we have to adapt to the reader and the listener rather than just keep going. I mean, it's fine to keep going as we are for certain people, but we do have to adapt. And that's the whole thing about writing. I think it's about learning to to be heard by the people we want to hear us, really. I think that's really great. All right. Now, I want to ask you just really quickly about this fiction, then we can move on to your other books. So you've got two of them out now, and you've got another two coming. Is that right?
I've got two. Yeah, this series, which I started quite a while ago, I'm going to finish. So I got
Mm.
two more novels in this series with Excavating Pema Dorje and The Buddha of Lightning Peak.
Yeah.
And the reason there's four is that, and here's where the nerdiness comes in. I'm a
Yeah.
practitioner. I didn't work. Everything is keyed into the mandala of the great Dakini Troma Nakmo in my head. Nobody knows
Right,
that. Even the
right.
people who are practitioners don't even notice that generally. But from the names and the kind of clothes they wear, it made it kind of easy to develop characters because each Buddha family. So we're going in terms of four Buddha families, but these are actually four teenage activity dakinis. So in the four kinds of activities. So if your listeners aren't familiar with that, it's a system of symbolism
Mm.
for wisdom being for afflictive emotions being transformed into wisdom.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so anyway, so I did the first two, and they have to associate with directions and seasons and colors and everything. So the first two I did, and then I was authorized to teach, and I was putting a lot of work into developing my voice, how to teach Dharma in my own way, not imitating somebody.
Mm.
So that took a while to gel, and I actually have a YouTube channel from that period where I was, experimenting, trying to see what connected with people. And so that took a lot of energy. And also, these books aren't big sellers or labors of love. So I put a pause on it. And so I'm going to go back and finish now that I've done. Then I wrote two nonfiction books and then made an audio book related to that, teaching Dharma in a
Yeah, yeah,
straightforward way. So,
yeah. Directly teaching rather than teaching indirectly. I think
right.
it's really interesting to have because all fiction writers world build, even people who say they're writing realistic fiction, they're still world building. And so it's really interesting to me that your world building was so intimately tied with your practice, your Dharma practice. So, and I think also, I think it's the first time there may have been, Tibetans or Bhutanese or Nepalese who did or are doing this, but I'm not aware of them. So I think it's the first time I've heard someone say that they took the mandala of a Vajrayana practice and used that as the world building map. Like that's very, very unique, I think, in itself. So I think that, and I didn't pick that up myself. So, and I'm well aware of trauma. So I think that's a very interesting thing. And in fact, I might encourage you to, this is my editing and publishing scholar hat going on. I might encourage you to write about that a little more in a blog post or something like that and use it as part of your, um, this book academic unique selling proposition, like that makes your
Yeah.
book very unique. Yes, it's a very enjoyable young adult, woman centered, or I'll also say that woman centered story. Very just engaging, entertaining, diverse, multicultural, kind of quite yeah, unique. It's just very unique. So I think you should probably um, sell that a little bit more. And I'm glad we had this chat because it might give you the opportunity to go, oh, okay, that is unique. No one's done that before, and unique is always a good. You know. So
Yeah, I had a website kind of about it for a long time, but it sat there so long that the website WordPress theme went out of business. I had to start again from scratch. So I'm just starting again from scratch, but I can do that. I have a Substack now. I'm in between books. I do like to blog. I've always like that. So just started up on Substack.
I
So
think it's really
maybe
interesting
somebody can see
too.
it there.
I think it might encourage people who are creative um, to embrace their creativity and bring it in alignment with the Dharma. Because one of the things, as we were talking before we started, that why I wanted to talk about your fiction first is because there's an idea in circulation in the West anyway that if you're 100% committed to the Dharma, you can't be committed to creative pursuits because they're somehow seen as worldly. But I think that this is I think it's really quite a damaging thing because as the Dharma adapts, the core of it doesn't adapt, but as the Dharma makes itself at home in new cultures, the things that we love about the Dharma in other cultures, like all the Tibetan cultural art, dance, music, that stuff we love about it. Likewise in Thailand, Cambodia, we love that about Dharma in those places. And it seems to me that the Dharma in the West, if we don't embrace our creativity, it's going to become a little bit sterile. And nothing against secular Dharma. I understand it has its place. I myself am religious, but not very religious. But I think a really dry Dharma that's not engaged with culture is hard for people to get behind and for people to actually love. One of the things that we do in our little community is really, really heavily focus on joy. as we sort of a
Yeah.
reordering of the four immeasurables. And it's one of the seven factors of awakening. But this isn't a Dharma talk, so we won't go there too much. But and I think these things are joyful, writing and music and dancing. I loved to boogie as a kid in the 80s. Like I loved
Mhm.
it. Um, and I think sometimes the Dharma in the West can be a bit dry and like sterile and without heart, and fun. And I think that may be why it doesn't attract, like you mentioned before, a lot of Dharma centers are all white-haired folks. This is really true. In Australia, we have an aging Dharma population. Young people are not coming along. There's some, but not many. And I think one of the reasons is it is so kind of dry. And if there is cultural stuff, it's cultural stuff that's not familiar to them and that they don't connect with and shouldn't feel that they have to connect with. You know what I mean? So I think this is really good stuff. Anyway, would you like to say anything about that?
No, I'm just with you on that.
I'm just really
Totally.
talking to myself here. Yeah.
Well,
So,
I think the other thing is about Tibetan Buddhism specifically, and I'm not sure about other schools of Buddhism, is when I heard about Lama Dorje Rinpoche, who was very dear to me initially, it was like his bio said he was an artist
mm,
with two, sons and a family man. And it took me a long time to figure out an art, and so I pictured him kind of in a beret with a, paintbrush. And he was a very, very creative, wonderful man, and he loved art. But art in the Tibetan culture that I'm familiar with is the highest level of art is imitating previous art to perfectly, and not and it has art has because it's connected with Dharma and Dharma is so sacred. There's lots of rules, and you can't break the artistic rules. I remember one of my Facebook friends was outraged that somebody drew a picture of a Buddha or sold a painting of a Buddha without the proper offering substances displayed in front of the throne. And I can get that. If you're trained that way, it looks really wrong. But I counter argued, she hasn't been trained that way. How would she know that's even what people do? And she's been trained in Western art. And then I was unfriended.
people are
He was
so
really
much in their
upset.
silos, aren't they? If you don't agree, you just get unfriended. Yeah. I mean, I'm also a fan of freedom of expression within even Western art has um, guidelines about what's good and what's not good. They're different guidelines, but they have guidelines. We don't have art prizes and art schools and museums and galleries for no reason. There are things that people consider to be good formally, and that was what was prized in Tibet, something that's formally good. And then there's stuff that's considered to be good because it's innovative or um, it creates a lived experience, a feeling. And I would argue that those things are also in Tibet. They just not in the form of visual art. They come in the form of like the beer songs and the poetry and the other ways of doing it. So I think that's right. I think uh one of
Sigar
the
Control, broke the mold because he does abstract impressionist art. I would call it that anyway. I don't know what he calls it. Beautiful, free art. And I don't know how that's gone over. And then we have the emergence of what's the name of that wonderful Tonka artist who does all kinds of modern things. And
the
I'm
Australian one.
forgetting.
There's a couple
I
of
think
Australian
he
ones who
was
do.
raised. He lives in. He lived in California for a while, but he illustrated Samuel Beerscholt's book about a guide to hell.
Right, right,
That
right.
book
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
his dying and going to hell. So there are some. Of course, it's going to happen.
Yeah,
As
it's going to happen.
yeah,
I think
I'm not
there's space
criticizing
for it.
Tibet. It's just our culture is individuality, creativity. Hopefully, I mean,
Yeah. I think
so
also like sometimes because of our background, we look to Tibet as kind of the example or the model, but there's also Japan and Thailand, Korea, and all these other places who have a very different. approach. And so the, Japanese Dharma art in particular is not representation of the Buddha. They have very strict rules, but the representation of the Dharma through like calligraphy or the one stroke paintings, like that's also in Chinese Zen, it's not Chan, the one stroke calligraphy thing. That's all very free form, formless. It's very beautiful. And so in the West, we have this great privilege of being able to draw on whatever. We're not limited geographically anymore. The internet's made everything available, and also people travel too. So the Dharma in the West is going to be much more diverse, I think, than Dharma elsewhere. It'll have lots of different styles. I think that's fine. I think that's good. Anyway, this is about books. So,
Have you read Ruth Ozeki, speaking of that? The Zen priest? Ruth Ozeki,
no.
A Tale for a Time Being is a famous book of hers. It's a wonderful Dharma novel. But again, she's not in your face about it. And she's a writerly writer, a literary writer. Very
Yeah,
good. I
I'm aware of
recommend
her.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read it. I think it won a big prize too, didn't it? It won
Yeah. Yeah.
some big prize.
I just noticed, I just, as I was reflecting today on the books that I admire in Dharma, she's probably number one for the fiction category for me. And I just went back and looked, and she has lots of books out. I'm ready to dive into it now.
Yeah, she has a whole canon of work, yeah. And also very good, also very good. I'm more into I like Chinese Chan nature poetry. I like Japanese haiku. I like how the Japanese haiku is a bit like what you did with your work. Like there always needs to be a mention of the season. There always needs to be a mention of some sort of like sensual experience of nature in the season, and also I like the form of it, like the very strict form of it. It's a bit like script writing, it's very formulaic. It has to be set out this way, but inside that there's a lot of freedom still. So I think likewise with traditional paintings of images of the Buddha, like they're very diverse, very diverse in how they look. Anyway, so after writing those two books, you were giving authority to teach, and then you focused on setting up your center and teaching directly, and then you started to write your next. It's one book with a workbook, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I felt, in this Dudjom Tersar world of my little sub lineage of the Nyingma
The
lineage.
beautiful
This is
cover,
called.
by the way. Really
Thank
beautiful
you. Clearing
cover.
the Way to Awakening. Um, and then I made a workbook for it, which is a new thing. Who's ever had it? This is a book about our foundational practices and Nundro. And again, just trying to, I work really hard on it, trying to get the language to connect with people, trying to sustain people's interest, make it enjoyable to read, not just something you have to do.
Mm, mm.
And then I made a personally narrated and did all the work on a audiobook so people who don't read books, that's selling as well as a book, could have access to this information. People really, and I'm happy to say people are liking it. I had no idea whether I was any good at that or not. And so a little nest for people who are doing Lundro or thinking about it, or would like to know what's involved if you want to get seriously involved in that form of traditional Tibetan Buddhism. So that's the last few years I've been working on that, and now that it's complete, I can start thinking about more creative pursuits. But the main thing is also the world has changed in the last 10 years, and particularly post-pandemic, with people's attention span, spending
Mm.
so much time online, attention span is very short. And I've noticed in your books also that you keep it short, keep it to the point, and and keep it simple. Vocabulary. I went through and made sure that I was at a 10th grade reading level max, maybe
Mm,
seventh
mm.
grade most of the time, and then questions come up in that about if you're actually teaching formal Dharma, what do you do about vocabulary? So it was okay up until I got to the part about Mahayana and bodhicitta, right? And then there's all this Sanskrit words that come in with the Mahayana and three kayas, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, and I didn't want to slam people, with all that all at once. So just tried to space it out, not have a new word every page, And then I had put a glossary in the back
Mm.
and other resources in the back, a directory in the back. And
I love a
so,
glossary. I think glossaries are
yeah,
such good things.
glossaries are good things. And I made the glossary definition simple. There was a book, oh gosh, a guy from England made wish I had it here in front of me, but a directory. It was a combination of a directory of Tibetan Buddhist centers, and then it had a glossary with Thupten Jinpa co-wrote, and then all about the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism that came out in probably the 80s. And that glossary got me through about 10 years of Buddhist studies, so helpful. And likewise, footnotes, even though a lot of people would be turned off by footnotes these days. One of my favorite books, most influential books, was Life of Shabkar, which was
Mm.
translated by Matu Ricard. And he had pages and pages and pages of footnotes. And I'm that kind of person that they weren't that hard to understand either. And that helped me understand the whole big picture of how all these storytelling in the main body of the book. And I noticed that also Yeshe Sogyal's, the Dharma of Yeshe Sogyal's autobiography, which is the original version was called Mother of Knowledge from the Nyingma Institute Press, Dharma Publishing. That was my first exposure to Tibetan Buddhism. And what those two books have in common is a really good storytelling,
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
engaging stories. So there's something there, we have to learn how to tell stories. Also, AI has come along and
Mhm.
information is accurate or inaccurate. Even if you give it the benefit of the doubt and you say everything's accurate, you know, people are just flooded with information. So, well, they want humanity, they want connection with people, they want a good story, and they want some warmth, some warmth in their dharma. So, and all kinds of nonfiction are, people go for how-to books now. They're kind of outmoded because people go to a YouTube video.
Yeah, they use a YouTube video, yeah.
Yeah, and
Likewise
so
with the Dharma. There's so much Dharma on YouTube.
there is. Anyway, world's changing every day, and I'm just trying to get a foot in every now and then, make contact with a few people who benefit from the writing.
Mm.
So that's my goal.
And will you, something that one of my teachers said to me that I really took on board was there's not much point writing books if you don't then use the books to teach the ideas in the books, which is not
Yeah,
really something I've done yet. But would you be doing that? Like,
I
would you be
am
having
using
like
it.
you're
I,
having a course? Yeah.
well, it's not just, I mean, to be honest, for how many years? 25 years? Lamas have asked me to teach Nundro in various capacities. So it does get redundant. I'm a creative person going over and over the same material again and again. I want, I'd rather have the basics. So I do now say, well, the details about that are in my book, but the
Yeah,
main point
yeah,
is blah, blah, blah.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. You got a resource to point them to rather than have to
Yeah,
repeat yourself endlessly. But something that is,
right.
I think, if you have the great misfortune to be a Dharma teacher, some your job is to repeat yourself endlessly with kindness and openness because everyone always is confused. You know what I mean? Like so
You'll find they're confused about stuff you thought they already knew,
oh,
years before.
yeah.
And you'll come
Yes.
up and you're trying to have your mouth hang open. Well, oh, and that's probably, I'm sure it was the same with me because we're learning from here and there in this culture. We're not immersed in Tibetan Buddhism in our Western societies. And So we just have to, there's things we're gonna miss, and there's assumptions we bring in. You know, my mom was kind of a spiritualist minister, did laying on of hands healing, psychic readings, and that kind of thing. And so I brought in, and I read her books, you know, off her shelf and stuff like that, with all those 70s and 1970s spiritual writings. And so I brought a bunch of baggage into Buddhism about things I assumed were true, that about Buddhist philosophy that a Tibetan Lama would never dream that we would imagine, you know. So I had to every 5 years ago you get a oh moment where you realize that you've been going in one direction and that's not what they're saying at all. So
Mm.
that's our job. It's not for me. I don't view it as misfortune, but I feel my job is to try to get people. You know, I'm not a big guru. I'm just out here trying to get people to get the missing parts and the misunderstandings in their basic knowledge fixed. You know, or they can decide they're free to decide that Buddhism isn't for them. You know, but to understand what at least this small system of Buddhism that I'm involved with, how it works, what it is, what the steps are, and then they can do with that information what they want.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think if you provide a foundation of information and practices, one of the things I think why there's a lot of confusion is because there's people are not practicing deeply. This is my humble opinion. And when they don't practice deeply, there's just ideas, conceptual ideas, and they are profoundly ephemeral. They come and go. And every time we access an idea or a memory, which this is proven by neuroscience, we change it. So every time we access a memory, we change that memory. It changes. It can change radically, which is why siblings in a family will never agree on what happened on November 11, 1976, because they all have access to those memories so many times that they've changed them. But also there's this thing, we meet our own mind, and so that colors everything, and so we hear things, and we're really just hearing it kind of like a version of our own mind. So I think it's important. The repetition is really important. I was being tongue in cheek about the misfortune thing, but I do teaching as a misfortune, but I do think it is. Um, I think it's something that's very difficult, and I think it's something that it's important not to want. I think it's important to understand that it's about serving others, but also about um, learning from others. I think the thing that is really important about writing Dharma in particular is that you don't presume that people on the other side know anything at all. I mean, like we're talking about Nundro, we're in the Tibetan system, so we know what that is. But in our little Sangha, and particularly like in every Western community, there's so many different sanghas. Like in my little town here, this is a very small town. Well, not very small. It's a small town. We have a Sri Lankan temple. We have Western secular insight. We have Vajrayana. We have Dzogchen. We have Sutrayana community as well. Like everything's here, and people have the ability to find the thing that meets their mind, that makes sense to them, that they can accommodate and practice. Because ultimately, if it's stuff we can't practice because we don't relate to it or we don't know how to do it, it's just dry stuff. It's just dry stuff. So that's why I think it's really great when we live in the West and we have all these different kinds of things to people. And, people can, as you said, you don't mind if they decide they're not a Buddhist, you know. But I think that if they can practice at least, you know, a bit, they will find benefit whether or not they decide they're a Buddhist, because a lot of the practices that even in, Vajrayana, which is very particular, um, a lot of those practices are very beneficial, and they've been proven to be beneficial scientifically and stuff like that. So you don't have to, I don't think, like there's this phrase, Jubu, Jewish Buddhist. We have a lot of those here. And we also have Christian Buddhists, people who are primarily Christian, but they also like Buddhism, and they're also people who are Buddhist adjacent. So, they wouldn't say they were Buddhist, but they meditate and they believe in kindness and there's all this sort of stuff. So I think if you give people the ability to practice in your tradition, then they can practice. And that, who I think my partner's always saying, I'm not sure if it's his own phrase or if it came from his guru, Kyabje Chogden Amtrân. He's always saying, practice clarifies everything. So just practice, you know? So I think that's true. If you give them the tool, which your book does, to practice in the way that's normal and what's not just normal, but the way that's supported in your lineage, and then they can practice and they know if it's for them or not, if it benefits them or not. So I think that's a really important thing. Rather than just the glossary is really good because there are so many words, but I think the practices are what it's about. You're teaching a practice that people can try and they can do and they can see. I think that's great. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
I would agree. In fact, I used a formula in each chapter where at the end I'd have, this is how you can try this out. Here's an 8-step process of trying this out, at least in your imagination. Even when you're not committed to doing Ngondro per se, just see how this works for you. So I definitely agree.
And with
It's
the workbook, does that do more of that? Give them more of a how to apply, how to do?
well, that's pretty much in the actual procedure for how to do. It's in the main book, but what I have in here is they're filling in like this is unique
Oh yeah, so
in there
they're
are many other
journaling and
books like
stuff.
this.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're
yeah.
journaling, asking questions like how to take it into their experience. I'm talking about when we go through the four thoughts that turn the mind, for example. Ask questions about. About this, and also talking about the Alaya, I've opened up to a page here, like one emotional habit I keep returning to is blank. Sometimes I feel I was shaped by blank.
So they're
I'd love to clear out the
reflections.
part of me that helps keeps going, like reflecting on how this applies to them. It's not like, it's another way of making, in addition to on the cushion practice.
Yeah, how to bring it to home, home to
Noticing
heart.
how it's touching you, how it's changing you.
Yeah, yeah. So reflection is really, as an academic, we've long accepted that reflection is such a powerful tool for bringing knowledge in those settings. It would be into work or into our practice as teachers, nurses, whatever. But reflection is like a really important and powerful tool. And I would suggest that it's one of the tools that in Dharma in the West you don't see very often being employed. And I think one of the things is because depending on what kind of Sangha you're in a traditional, say, Thai Sangha or Cambodian Sangha, it would be your monastic teacher who asks you to those questions and prompts you to reflect. But in the West, we might not have actual contact with our teacher. That teacher might have a million students. We might not be able to be in their present and get them and have them ask us those things. So I think providing them for the people to do themselves is a really powerful tool. I think that's a great thing.
Well, we also I don't know what you do in your online classes, but when I have a larger group, like more than 6 or more people, I have breakout rooms, for
Mm.
a 10 minutes discussion. And I'll say, well, how, how did this work out in your practice this week? Last week we discussed this, what happened? This kind of questions, can be done in a group setting. It doesn't always have to be done one to one.
Yeah,
So,
reflection is important, I think. Whether it's in a group. I think in a group is also very powerful because then people have peer learning. They're learning from each other, which is a very important thing. Yeah, that's great.
and
So,
I learn from them. I learn from them. Like the other day we were talking, I was just mentioned that, Dudjom Rinpoche and Dudjom Lingpa recommended doing Tonglen at the conclusion of the Bodhicitta section, and when you finish your recitation, then you do Tonglen briefly. And that opened up this Pandora's box of feeling
Yes,
people had
I can
about
imagine.
Tonglen.
Mm.
That they've been, and then and it opened, and I wasn't really, I kind of moved on from the 1980s style of Pema Chodron kind of style of doing Tonglen, sort of subconsciously, just from reading traditional Dharma books to how it was maybe done more traditionally, at least in Nyingma circles. And I had no idea people were having these horrible
Yeah,
experiences.
it's very triggering for some people. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. So it's very educational to hear back from people, not just to write and talk out into space. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that one of my teachers said to me was that we need to practice is about becoming familiar with our mind. We all know this. We've heard this so many times from everyone, becoming familiar with our mind, but also practice is becoming familiar with other people's minds. How are they
Mm.
thinking? What are their emotions like? What are they doing? So that we can relate to them and communicate with them. And one of the things about that Tonglen question, which as soon as you said Tonglen, I thought, oh yes, because we've seen this. We've seen this,
Yeah.
Um, we had, I think I can't remember when it was. I had a lovely American nun friend of mine who I brought out to Australia, and she was teaching Tonglen, and among other things, because in Australia we tended to had to bring people here, so we've brought lamas and kempos and things here to teach because there wasn't a lot of that here. We don't have a large, we do have a Tibetan refugee community, but we don't have a large community, and we were in the Tibetan tradition at that point. So anyway, she was this lovely American nun. She came out to teach Tonglen, and there was one person in the room who just had a complete panic attack. And it was really surprising to me. And this was in like 1990 something. Anyway, so it was quite some time ago, but it was really interesting to me how something that you take for granted as like this is a very traditional, very safe practice can trigger stuff in people. Like she had a complete panic attack. And one of the things I'll ask you about what you think about this after, but one of the things I think is traditionally the Tonglen I learnt was Chikara Yeshi Dorji. So traditionally, that's done first for yourself. It says very explicitly, you do this for yourself first. So you show yourself love, you show yourself compassion, you show yourself kindness first. That's the core, that's the beginning. And then you move on to the people you love, and then you move on to the people who are just sort of friends, and then you move on to acquaintances, and then you move on to enemies. So it's done in this staged way, but that line from Chikawa George, I think, is very powerful and often omitted in the instructions, in the practice instruction. Begin with yourself. It's often just deleted, not mentioned, not discussed. And so I think people come into this like that very nun who came here, she said to me once, oh, in the West, everyone's experienced child abuse because they weren't brought up in the Dharma, which was sort of at the time I thought a strange thing to say, but it's kind of almost true. They're not taught about their nature. They're not resting in that. They're not confident in that. And so they're coming from often a place of trauma. So I think sometimes this idea of like giving yourself wholly to someone else when you're on a very unstable footing to begin with is very traumatizing. Do you think that's what it is or something else?
I think they felt that they had to be super, I can't speak for them, but what I got from it through my ears was you have to you have to imagine horrible things happening to people and or animals. You have to rip yourself apart with compassion for suffering. And I had no idea.
That sounds very
For me, it's just
masochistic.
breathing it in and sending out, what you
That
send
sounds
out.
very
So,
masochistic, doesn't it? Like very
but I
masochistic.
gotta say that in the Nyingma sources that I'm familiar with, I've looked for it, like in Longchenpa and in Dudjom Rinpoche's description, Dudjom Lingpa's description in the Sarah Nyingtig. There's nothing about yourself. And
Mm.
when you even bring it up in Nyingma circles, you get this sort of also kind of, I'm going to ascribe it to men, kind of feeling like tough it up, tough,
Toughen up.
suck it up, people.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But
Well,
anyway, I don't know. But
it's
it
in the
was
original
totally
text.
shocking to me. Yeah.
If you go back to the original
So,
with Atisha and then Chikao Yeshi Dorji and then Geshe Langu Tangpa, those are the original. It's a Kadampa Geshe, not a Gelugpa Geshe.
yeah.
Um, those are the origin texts. They and Chikao Yeshi Dorji was a Nyingmapa, and then got teachings from Atisha and Geshe Langu Tangpa, I think, or it might be the other way around. Anyway, those are the origin texts, and they all have that line: "Begin with yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this teaching was
No.
secret, because if you don't begin with yourself, it can be kind of quite triggering and strange and masochistic, which I don't
Well,
think is its
what
intention.
Tenzin Palmo says, because you probably heard from her too. I did,
Yeah,
is
she's
that
one of
she
my
found
teachers.
these.
Mm.
She found that these amazing. She found that these people were the people, very advanced practitioners, had done all these years of practice, were coming, and what they really she felt they needed to do is go back and do metta practice for themselves
Mm,
and
mm.
build that foundation, and then they could have much more accomplishment with their advanced practices.
Yeah,
After that foundation had been sort of as homework, revisited,
yeah, yeah,
because it
yeah,
probably wasn't presented in their Nundro that part of their four measurables was beginning with yourself.
yeah,
Love.
yeah.
Measurable love began with yourself.
Just as a little aside, Jetsma's next book, which I helped edit, is about um, Geshe Chikao Dorji's Lojong teaching.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing, very beautiful book. I think it's called. I can't remember what because the publishing company decided on a title. Um, I think it's called. It's something about heal yourself, heal your mind. Something that sounds terribly commercial and stuff. It's probably not that, but it has this. The title has this implication of start at home, start with yourself. And Jessam has been a great advocate of that. I think I've heard her so many times say, if you are in trouble and on unstable footing, you need to establish some kind of foundation first. She uses the word ego. If you have a fragile, damaged, traumatized ego, you need to heal that first. And the way to heal that obviously is like meta, like you said. So yeah, so I think that book comes out sometime next year. So that'll be really great. Lojong teachings, I think, are super important to her because they were super important to her guru, you know. So I think that'll be great. Yeah, I think there's something strange in the West, isn't there? Like, I don't know if it comes from Tibet because all the Tibetan lamas that I have been close to have just been the kindest, most loving people. We both know Karma Rinpoche, and I don't think you could find a more loving and kind person, more generous, more humble, and more open-hearted and devoted. You couldn't find someone more, And I think it's strange to me that that isn't there in the Lojong teachings because that's what they're about. They're about becoming more kind, more compassionate. It's a strange thing, isn't it? So in your book, you talk about you make that suggestion that at the end of that part of the Nondre practice, they do the Lojong. So in your workbook, is that sort of like a major part of that, or is it more informal that you kind of
Oh no, it was it's just like I mentioned.
maybe you
It's
need
not
to
Lojong
revise
at all.
that?
Tonglen, right?
Oh, sorry, Tonga, not
Um,
Lojong. Yeah,
uh, I don't even know. I mean, it's not a major part of the teachings. It's not like Tonglen is not counted.
yeah, yeah.
I think this is probably present in other systems. I think it was definitely present in Longchen Nyingtik Nundro that I did. You just do a little bit of Tonglen after
Mm.
you're done with, I don't know, uh, we did concurrent reflection on the four thoughts while reciting the bodhicitta
Mm.
vow, So then just a little bit of Tonglen goes a long way
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And one of the forms of Tonglen that
for me.
is my absolute favorite is from the Dalai Lama, where
Oh,
he just says, um, and he does the start with you first. So he does the traditional Kadampa way of doing it, which is fill your own heart with joy, love, and kindness. I'm paraphrasing here. Hope I'm not like completely misquoting him. Fill your own heart with joy, love, and kindness, and then send joy, love, and kindness out to all the beings in all the world. So he does
oh
this.
wow.
He does the same thing. Like start by bringing love, joy, and kindness into one's own heart,
Mm.
and then send it out. And it's just that
Oh
very
wow.
simple, like two lines. Here's how he teaches it. Bring love, joy, and kindness into yourself. Send love, joy, and kindness out to others. And the way
Mm.
Jetsima teaches it, she teaches that you bring in joy, love, and kindness, and you have a black pearl at your heart, and that
Mm.
black pearl transforms into white, radiant pearl. And then from there, the light goes out to others. So clearly,
Mm-hmm.
this is about starting with oneself, both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
they're both drawing on the original Kadampa way of doing it. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting to me. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I want to
Hey, I
ask
have to
you.
pause for a second because I'm having technical difficulties.
Sure, sure, sure.
My iPad's running down even though it's plugged in, so I'm going to get another
I'll
cable and see
pause.
what's going on with that.
Okay, we're back from a little break and we fixed our technical issues. So I want to wind up by asking you, what are you reading right now or have read recently that is resonating with you? It doesn't need to be Dharma.
Well, I'm reading mostly literary historical fiction right now. For example, Anthony Doerr. That's how
Mm,
you say his name. Um, and I love really, great writing. I'm not so much into general genre fiction myself. And so I guess that goes with my own predilections when I think about it. Writing about my books have flashbacks to, basically, these girls have previous lives in
mm,
Tibet. And so they're having flashbacks to those lives around the great female adept Sarah Kondro. And there's a little magical realism also in Anthony Doerr and other the very creme de la creme of the historical fiction kind of literary writers. So that's where I'm going. And what I'm finding that's striking me right now is that a really great book like that, that's long and excellent, and even an audiobook, I'm not always reading, I'm sometimes listening, performed by great voice actors. They get me away from social media
mm,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in scrolling, I have a YouTube fetish. And I was just going through today and unsubscribing from all these things that were channels that were relevant to me maybe 5 years ago and aren't relevant to me now. I'm just watching them just because they're familiar faces and this kind of thing. But if you can get involved in a really great in-depth book by a great writer, boy, it overcomes the the negativity really of being of just blah 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 dopamine, hits on the scrolling. So, but the story, I want to say one thing about writing and writing fiction is that, and this relationship to sadhana, just to bring it around to your original point, is that I found, I'm just going to sound woo woo, when I wrote my books, my novels, which were out of my head, I made up things happen in real life that totally corresponded. Out of the blue, things would happen that would correspond with that reality. So the magic of Mahayoga, where you see the outer reflected in this of your in your outer environment and your inner environment, the changes and phenomena related to your the main sadhana you're practicing in depth applies also to writing, and it may apply to reading as well, but particularly to writing because you're so immersed in it, and it just shows, it demonstrates. I don't know what the how to explain it all, but it demonstrates that reality is not what it seems. It's more flexible than it seems. So then it made me actually a little paranoid about making sure and write positive stuff and listen to positive stuff, because in shaping consciousness is being shaped by the book, receptively or creatively, and then and that shapes your experience in the world.
Mm.
And so that helps me, when I come to a really juicy true crime channel on YouTube, and I want to hear about a murderer who was caught, to think, hey, how about what if I read some beautiful positive literary fiction, and not that has a heroic protagonist, and a happy ending.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because that's the kind of phenomenon I want in my life.
Yeah. This is why I don't watch horror movies, because from a very young age, I was aware that what you put in comes out again, and what you put in comes up again. So I kind of like stopped engaging with all that kind of stuff a long time ago, because I was aware that what you put in comes back up, and then you've got to deal with it when it comes back up. So I think it's really important to make sure that I mean, I don't want to sound like a grade school teacher, saying, "Yeah, don't watch that
Oh
stuff."
no.
But it is really important that we recognize that what we put in constitutes what our mind is then forever, because it stays there. People might not remember it moment to moment, but it's in there, and it will come back up at some point, usually through dreaming, but sometimes in our relationships to people, we're acting out what we've put in, and we're not even being authentic. We're just acting out what we've put in there. That's why I also don't watch reality television, because it's just like televised greed, televised lust, televised competition, televised bullying. It's like I'm just not putting that in there. But that's not to say all reality television is terrible. I did recently watch a really nice pottery competition that was really, really, really quite nice. So yeah, so I get what you're saying about keep it keep it PG. I think it's important to kind of keep it PG.
A little sex, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I wanted to say something about. I want to
With
quickly.
willing participants.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fully consenting human adults. Yeah. But I want to,
Exactly.
um, something that happened when you're talking about writing and reading. There's um, there's neuroscience that shows that when we're reading, more parts of our brain are lit up than any other activity, including watching TV. So there's something about reading that is different to watching TV or doom scrolling, obviously, but also not the same study, but another study looked at the brain when we're writing, and it's the only time that all parts of the brain, like the entire brain, is lit up. It's the only time. Because when we're writing, we're imagining, we're remembering, we're drawing on our skill set. We're also comparing. So when you write, you're always already editing. You're choosing words. You write something out and then you immediately change it back, change it to something else. So it's the only time that when we heavily draw on our memories and on our relationships and stuff like that when we're writing. So it's the only time that the whole brain is lit up. I'm sure there are other times, but so far it's the only time that they found. Everything's awake. And I'd be really interested to see when like these new neuroscience studies they're doing on meditators, you know, to see what, you know, because they show clearly distinct regions are lit up, but not the whole brain. You know what I mean? I'd be really interested to see a brain scan of an awakened person. Like, I want to see that because I want to
Have
see.
you been reading Andrew Newmark and I'm forgetting the name of the other author? There's a new field emerging of called neurotheology. There's even a textbook out already on that. So they go into some of that.
Wow.
It's we can so there's it's emerging. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's great. Contemplative science as well, that's emerging as a thing where they're sort of studying contemplative arts, like, you know, not just meditation and stuff like that, but also contemplative painting, nature poetry, all that sort of stuff, how that changes the brain and makes the brain more plastic, more able to adapt. Anyway, so I'm going to hit you with one final little teeny weeny question and then we'll wind up for the day. Do you have a favorite book? If so, what is it?
You know, what comes back to me is Shabkar, like
Mm,
I mentioned before. And I don't know, I haven't read it recently, how it will land with me, you know, decades later. But I've reread it several times. And there's something, particularly, there's episodes where he's on a real island that really exists, Lake Kokonor, on Lake Kokonor. It's a lake that has many names in northern Tibet, which is like it's a Mongolian, Chinese, Tibetan crossroads kind of area. And he and a bunch of yogis, you know, they go out where the lake was frozen to this island, and then it would thaw in the summer, and they'd be stuck there for the whole summer. There's no way to get to the land, so they gather provisions, and they had real life problems, you know, with people hating on them for begging for food, and I don't know, it was so real. And I one time I woke up with a knowing that they made a musical out of it.
mm.
And I had I had several lines from and a melody from the musical. I think it really needs to be a musical.
So,
It's so vivid, amazing.
so you received in a dream a
Yeah, a
core of a
song.
musical.
Da, 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 here on this island, da, 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 I remember the father. So yeah, just not even his exact words, but just I was so tied in with the story
An adaptation.
and
Yeah.
the heroism, developing a new kind of hero. This guy
Mm.
who was followed later in his later years, he dressed like a beggar. He was actually a monk, but he looked like a beggar with long hair, and beggar whole crowds of beggars because people would find out that he was a great yogi, and the town would have a great silk ceremony. So the beggars would follow him from town to town so that they could partake in the silk ceremony and get fed. So he was actually running a little social service agency.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of socially engaged Buddhism and what would be considered today like really disengaged Buddhism. You know, real extreme yogi isolation. I do recommend it for anybody who has patience for small print and footnotes.
Mm, I love that book. We've got it on our bookshelf behind me. I just really love it. And Shabkar is one of the lamas um, that I think everyone can relate to. I mean, if on the surface it's like maybe not because he's quite aesthetic, and a lot of people are not fans of that these days. But when you dive in, the warmth and humility, I really think humility is a profound blessing, but also a really strong sign of accomplishment. Just this profound humility shines through, and also his just complete lack of um, bias for any particular tradition, any particular thing. he was just bias free. I just love Shepka. Love, 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 love.
Yeah, I'm there with you on that. I do want to mention that we're only 1 year from now. Finally, Sarah Condro's autobiography is going to be coming out, which I think, to me, it seems like the whole world should, the earth should shake, and everything's good because Sarah Jacoby's been working on this for 25 years, and with all sorts of, is on a dialect, and with all sorts of local informants trying to translate the slang that's used and so forth. She's put her life on, dedicated to this, in addition to raising a family and being a full-time professor at Northwestern. So keep an eye out. I've been privy to her reading aloud, and you can probably find some of that on the internet, sections from it. It's just a real woman's story who was a Buddha, born a Buddha, and in her own words, and how it, and she could talk about her real, the struggles in her real life, where she was subject to terrible abuse
Mm.
and normal everyday squabbles and rivalries and stuff, and then then all of a sudden she'd be having visionary experiences, revealing termas and so forth. It's a wild ride.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
this is going to be the greatest.
I'm looking forward to that. Is that coming out with Shambhala or?
I didn't ask. I assumed it was, but I could be wrong. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
probably.
exciting because
It's at the publisher now, is all I know, and she says it'll be out in a year. So that'll be if you're watching this or listening to this later, folks, that's 2026 in, say, October, November. Look for it.
yeah, because Sarah Condro's Pith Instructions just came out
Yes,
this year at some point. So yeah, so
yes.
it's kind of like taken such a long time for Sarah Condro's work to kind of take the place that it deserves. It's a really
Yes,
interesting
long after
thing.
the empowerments have been given many times in the United States, at least three I can think of, and so forth. But the actual this story, Chacho Pache told them. Christina, who passed away, Christina
Mm,
Monson, who wrote the Pith Instruction, translated the Pith Instruction book, and Sarah Jacoby were students of his, that they really couldn't have any mistakes. It had to be at 100% right.
mm.
So that's kind of daunting. So they've just vetted it again and again and again, all these works. So yeah, we can
Wonderful.
look forward to that.
I am looking forward to it. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think it was a fun chat. I had a fun chat anyway. On
I
my
had a fun
side, it was
chat.
fun. So I will hopefully get you back in when you do other books. So when you get your fiction series finished, if you do other Dharma books, we'll obviously get you back to chat about them. And I think have a lovely time. I'm about to go on a shortish retreat, maybe longish retreat, not sure. And I wish you all the best with that. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Lama. See you
Thank you
next
so
time.
much. Have a
Bye.
lovely weekend. It's a
Okay,
Friday
you
here.
too.